Greetings gamers, my name is Lanto and this video is going to give you everything you need to know to get started playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition. In this video I'm going to be going over the very basics of the core gameplay loop. I'm going to be telling you what products are probably best for you to buy depending on whether you're a player, a game master, and whether you have experience with TTRPGs or not. And then I'm going to be pointing you to some more resources to help you dive deeper into this game. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is for people who want an RPG to tell classic fantasy stories in a diverse and wild world. For players who want to express themselves through a huge variety of fun character options, and for GMs who want robust guidance and frameworks that work. So in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you play as a fantasy adventurer, following one of several archetypal classes like fighter, wizard, rogue, or some more unique and interesting things like oracle, thaumaturge, or inventor. The core gameplay loop is anytime you want to do something that has a chance of failure, you roll a 20-sided dice and then you add modifiers to that. If the result of that dice roll and those modifiers is equal to or exceeds the target number or difficulty class of the thing that you're trying to do, you succeed. Now, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is different to something like D&D 5e in the way that it handles its degrees of success. In Pathfinder, there are 4 degrees of success. There are critical failure, failure, success, and critical success. Anytime you exceed the DC, the difficulty class, by 10 or more, your degree of success increases by 1. So if you would normally hit a creature, but you roll 10 over what its armor class is, you critically hit the creature. Same when it comes to failure. If you roll 10 below the DC of any given check, your degree of success goes down by 1. Now, some weapons, different abilities, feats, and spells have additional rules that trigger on critical failure or critical success, so you've got a lot more variety in the things that happen when you are making attacks, performing checks, or casting spells. The biggest difference between Pathfinder 2nd Edition and many other game systems like D&D 5e is the 3-action economy. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, every turn you have 3 actions and a reaction. You can use those 3 actions to do anything you want. You want to move, and sprint across the battlefield? Use your 3 actions. You want to stand there and attack something 3 times? You can do, but each attack after the first is going to have a penalty. This is called the multiple attack penalty, and it starts at -5 with your second attack and goes to -10 with your third, though you can lower that with some features. Everything that you can possibly do in combat in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is broken up into this action economy. So some things will only cost a single action. A lot of spells cost 2 actions to cast, giving you that 3rd action to play around with each turn. And then some actions are also free, meaning you don't need to use one of those 3 actions you get every turn to do them. Reactions, like in a lot of games, only happen when something triggers them. The classic example of this is the attack of opportunity. This only applies to fighters and certain monsters from the start of the game, though you can pick this up as a feat later on. But anytime a creature moves out of your threatened range, you can use your action to make an attack against them. The fact that attack of opportunity isn't universal like it is in a lot of other games frees up the battlefield and allows creatures to move around a lot more, which gives you a lot more dynamic and interesting combats instead of where everyone comes together in a line and just hits each other till they're dead. The other 3 big things that you need to know before you start playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition is the proficiency system, traits, and types of bonuses. There are 4 levels of proficiency: trained, master, expert, and legendary, and these add a +2, 4, 6, or 8 depending on which level of training you have received. The big difference with the proficiency system in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and the thing that trips a lot of people up, is when you are trained in a thing, regardless of what that thing is, and you make a check, you add your level to the roll. This means that as you level up, you get significantly better at the things that you are good at. Next up, we have the trait system. This is one of my favorite things about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Traits are a keyword system that conveys a whole bunch of extra information without taking up a lot of space on the page. They are universal to whatever the trait is talking about, and they really help you to interact with mechanics in a much more deep and meaningful way. So if you have a spell and that spell specifically targets undead, that undead is going to be a trait, and those creatures that have the undead trait also get a bunch of other benefits that don't need to be listed in their stat block. This is one of the things that trips new people up a lot because it moves a lot of the rules out of stat blocks and spells and weapons and to the trait section, and this makes it a little bit more difficult when you're first learning the rules because everything isn't isn't all in the one place, but it means that as you develop an understanding for the system, when you look at a rule and it has a trait, you know immediately all of the extra ways that that's going to interact with the rest of the system. And the last big thing that I think you need to know when you're coming into Pathfinder 2nd Edition is the way that bonuses work. Now, if you're coming from D&D 5e, let's say, you're used to advantage and disadvantage. Fairly simple, fairly binary. If you are getting some kind of bonus to something, you're usually getting advantage. If you're getting some kind of penalty, it's usually disadvantage. Pathfinder 2nd Edition works a bit differently. Instead, you get several different types of bonus. You get circumstance, item, and status bonuses. Circumstance bonuses come from the circumstance of your situation. Say you are a fighter and you've just raised your shield. That will give you a circumstance bonus to your AC because you're behind your shield. Item bonuses come from items you are wearing or carrying. So an +1 set of armor will give you a +1 item bonus to your armor class. Then we come to status bonuses. Now these come from conditions, spells, and other effects like that. An example of this would be the heroism spell, which gives you a +1 to attack rolls, saving throws, skill checks, and perception checks. So pretty much every bonus or penalty that you get in PF2 is going to come from one of these three categories, and the important thing to note is that you only take the best or worst from each of these categories. So if you have an item that is giving you a +1 to your AC and you get another item that gives you a +2 to your AC, you only take the +2, you don't combine them. There are a few exceptions to this, but generally the rule is you only take the best penalty or bonus. So now let's talk about getting into the system. What do you want to buy first, and what is your kind of buying path once you've gotten started in the system? If you are brand new to tabletop role-playing games, if you have very little experience playing any other games, you want to start with the beginner box. This thing is loaded with information and resources and tools to get you started. It's got a small adventure to help you and your players, if you're the GM, get started and understand the system. It's got solo adventure for GMs. It's also got reference cards and pre-built character sheets, really user-friendly character sheets for helping you build your own characters, and it's got a bunch of mini tokens and a map. Seriously, this thing is super heavy and packed with content and is the perfect place to start if you're brand new to role-playing games. Once you've played through the starter set and are familiar with the basic rules, I'd say pick up the core rulebook. This is going to give you all of your information for playing the game, everything you need to know about the base character classes and ancestries, as well as give you some advice on being a game master, and it has a primer to the world of Golarion and the Age of Lost Omens, which is the default campaign setting for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And then if you're looking to continue your journey from the beginner box, I'd recommend picking up the Troubles in Otari adventure path. This runs you from levels 2 to 4, continues the storyline that you started in the adventure path, and gets you to grip with some of the character advancement and making slightly higher level characters. If you have played a TTRPG before, or you're comfortable with kind of the core gameplay loop of a D20 system, I'd recommend you check out my biggest differences between Pathfinder 2nd Edition and D&D 5e video first. This video is going to go through some of the high level differences between the two systems, give you an idea of whether or not the Pathfinder system sounds interesting to you. But next, I'd say you want to pick up the core rulebook. This is going to give you everything that you need and will be an invaluable reference resource while you're at the table. Now, if you're coming to the game as a player, the first thing I would purchase if I were you is the core rulebook. That's got everything you need to get started. It's going to have all of your base ancestries and classes, all of the rules of the game, all of the magic items and spells that you're going to reference in those early games. Next, I check out my character creation video. This is where I walk through the process of making my first character in PF2, and it kind of goes through the character creation process, filling in the character sheet, all of that good stuff. Then if you're a mechanically minded player and you want more options, I'd suggest picking up the Advanced Player's Guide. This has got a bunch of new ancestries, class options, and a whole bunch of other player options to give you more flexibility and more choice with your characters. Then if you are playing in the Golarion setting, in the default PF2 setting, I'd say pick up the Lost Omens World Guide. This is an introduction to the world of Golarion in the Age of Lost Omens. It goes a little bit beyond what's included in the core book, and it will give you a primer on the world that you'll be playing in. If your game master is running a homebrew world, you don't need to pick that up, but it is still a really interesting read. And from there are 4 books at the time of recording that I'd recommend that you you look into them. The first of these is Guns and Gears. This introduces the Gunslinger and Inventor classes and gives you a whole bunch of extra options as a player if you want to have some kind of tech involved in your character. Next, I'd recommend The Dark Archive. This is a book filled with occultist magic and intrigue. It introduces the thaumaturge and psychic classes and has a bunch of information on playing one of these more occult attuned characters. Then we have the Book of the Dead. This introduces a bunch of new playable undead ancestries and archetypes, as well as giving you a whole host of new undead related options. And then finally, Secrets of Magic. If you are a spellcaster, you're going to want to get this book. It introduces a whole bunch of new spells, new magical items and curiosities, and it introduces a whole bunch of new magical subsystems like ley lines and true names that are going to allow you to interact with magic in really unique and fun ways. If you're stepping into the role of Game Master for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the first thing I'd recommend you do is check out this video where I talk about all the reasons why I left 5th Edition behind and moved over to Pathfinder 2nd Edition from the point of view of a Game Master. Next, after you've picked up the core rulebook and are familiar with the basic rules, I'd recommend you check out the Game Mastery Guide. This contains a whole host of information for Game Masters, including tips on how to build your world, as well as a whole load of tools for building new encounters, building monsters and items and hazards, for running subsystems, which are additional variant rules that can make your game even more interesting. And then it also includes an NPC gallery, which is a bunch of generic creatures like noble or spy or guard that you can introduce into your world. After the Game Mastery Guide, you're probably going to pick up one of the bestiaries. There are 3 mainline bestiaries at the moment. All of them are filled with really unique and interesting monsters. I'd start with Bestiary 1, as that's got all the kind of classic fantasy monsters in it, and then either work your way through or jump straight to Bestiary 3, because that has got the weirdest stuff in it. And then if you're planning on playing in the Age of Lost Omens in the world of Golarion, pick up the Lost Omens World Guide, and I'd also recommend picking up the Lost Omens Travel Guide. The World Guide gives you an overview of the kind of geopolitics of the region, but the Travel Guide gives you that intimate look at the day-to-day life of different peoples in the world of Golarion, and I personally think that is much more useful for running moment-to-moment gameplay at the table. Now, the big thing to know about PF2 is that all of the mechanical rules are available for free on the Archives of Nethys. All of this is going to be linked down in the description below. That means that you don't actually have to buy any books. I still would really recommend picking up some of the core books, because being able to flick through and read them in that format is really useful, especially for me, but especially for like monster reference at the table. Being able to look at the rules freely available online on the Archives of Nethys is super handy. If you want a character builder that's going to walk you through the options you have available to you, there are things like Path Builder and the Wayfarer's Guide. Links to those will be in the description below. And I'm also going to put links to a whole bunch of other resources for learning the game, as well as a bunch of other YouTubers who focus on different stuff to help you really immerse yourself in the system and understand what it's all about. If you haven't already, definitely check out my video on the biggest differences between Pathfinder 2nd Edition and D&D 5e. But until next time, happy gaming.